Hello again, my most amazing artists. Today I'm going to show you one of my all-time favorite ways to create prints. This is something you can do at home with a few simple supplies. The things that you're going to need for this project are some washable markers, and I would recommend that you have the washable kind, but if you don't, it will probably still work as long as it doesn't say permanent. You also will want a Ziploc bag or any kind of clear plastic baggie. If you don't have this, another material that works for this would be plastic wrap, or you can use aluminum foil as well. I would recommend the clear plastic baggie because it's easier to work with and you'll be able to see whatever it is you're drawing a little bit easier than you would if you were to use a different material. And it's not flimsy. It's not going to break on us. Another thing that you're going to need for this project is a paper towel or a couple paper towels in case you make a mess. You're going to want some water, and I just have my water here in a tub. You might just want to put it in a bowl, or when you're ready for this step, you could just walk over to the sink and do it there. And you're going to want a sheet of paper. And if you're like me, you'll probably want a couple sheets of paper because this is so much fun. So let's see how we can create some prints at home. Remember, a print or printmaking is when we transfer one design onto several sheets of paper. And you can do this once for a monoprint, which is what we're making today, or you can do it several times, say like you use a stamp. That would be considered printmaking because you're able to repeat that image over and over again, and you're transferring that ink or paint onto another surface. So let's see what that looks like with our bags. So down here I have created kind of a little space where I have a messy mat. I would recommend that you put something down on your table. It could be newspaper. You might want to ask an adult where would be the best place in your home to do this activity where it would be easy to clean up. Okay, but it shouldn't be too messy. Now, here's what we need to do. I'm going to lay this down just so that you can see a little bit better what I'm doing. I am going to take a plastic bag, and if you have a bigger plastic bag for your full-size sheet of paper, great. If you don't, you might even consider cutting your paper so that it fits a little bit better on your paper, so that it fits better on your bag. Now, here's what we're going to do. We're going to use our markers to create any design that we want. So here, I think what I want to do is I want to create almost like a sunset. So I'm literally just going to draw whatever I would like to create on the surface of the plastic bag. As I do this, I want to use different colors, make sure I'm keeping my markers capped. Some colors are going to show up a little bit better on your bags than other colors. And that's okay. Don't assume automatically that it's dried out because what might work on paper doesn't always work on the material. It might just take some experimenting. Okay? And from here, I would want to use as many colors as I want. And what I'm going to do after this is I'm going to take, and you don't have to fill in the whole space. So let's say you want to draw something with detail. That's fine. Okay, just take your time. I'm just showing you a quick example. So I can cover this whole thing. And right here you'll notice, I'll bring it a little closer to the camera so you can see, there's some beading happening, as in the liquid is kind of pooling up in some areas. This is okay. Even if it still looks like this, it's going to look good once we get it on our paper. So what do I do from here? I have this design on my bag. I'm going to set it aside. I'm going to take my sheet of paper. I'm going to use my paper towel and I'm going to get it wet. I do not want to soak my paper. I just want to get the entire thing coated evenly in water. So I'm gently brushing over the surface. Be careful not to go too fast. Once paper is wet, it becomes fragile. You want to make sure that you're getting the same amount of water all over your whole paper. It should soak in. If you see any water on the surface that looks shiny, use a dry paper towel and kind of sponge that up, because we do not want our paper to be soaking wet. We just want it to be damp enough that when we rest this paper against our marker, so I'm going to set this somewhere where it's not going to mess up my table, okay? I just want it to be damp enough that when I set it on top of this marker, it's wet enough to pick up the marker, almost like we're cleaning off the surface of the bag. Be careful when you're transferring this bag around that you're not accidentally flipping it upside down, or you're going to be really disappointed. So I'm going to set this on top of my bag, and it might even help to use a little bit of extra water on the back. I'm being careful not to move this around too much. If you have ever created a temporary tattoo or anything like that before, it's a very similar process. So I'm just being gentle not to add too much water again. You'll get used to the process if you do this a couple times, and you'll understand what I mean by too much water. Because if you get it too wet, what's going to happen is your design is going to run. Now, once it seems like this color is showing through my paper pretty well and it doesn't look like I missed any spots, that means I'm good to go. I don't need to continue to rub or do anything like that. I just made sure that all parts of it touch the surface, and I'm just going to lift up my design. And voila, I've transferred it to this other piece of paper. I've made my first print. And you can see it has a pretty interesting texture, and it's going to look even cooler once this dries. Now, I'm going to set that aside for just a moment because I do want to show you one more trick that you might find useful. So here, let's say I want a particular image. For instance, I decided to draw this lady who's sitting at a desk, and I just found this picture in a magazine. So what I decided to do was trace right on top of all of those lines, and then I can come back and I can lift that image. Now, detail is a little bit trickier to do, so I recommend that you try it at least once before you go to try to do this. But again, if I want a certain image, I can just trace over top of that image that I find and create whatever it is that I'm seeing. So now that I have that image traced out, I can do the exact same thing. I take my paper, I lay it on top of my surface, I get my paper wet, and then I lay my wet paper directly on top of the marker. So wet my paper really well. And again, you'll notice here I'm using a slightly larger bag. This is a gallon-sized bag. If you have that, that would work out really well. Remember, again, if you don't have this, aluminum foil works well. You can even just try finding a surface in your house. Maybe you have a spare Tupperware container or something that you aren't using that was supposed to be trash. You can see if it will allow you to draw on it and try it with that. You might even find that it gives you a different texture. So I'm going to set this aside, pull my image over here, and I'm going to be careful as to where I line my image up because I want this one against the side of my paper personally. So I'm thinking about the composition, where do I want it in space, and then I'm gentle. Do not add too much water if you are trying to get detail because it will run. Your design will bleed and it will cause all of those beautiful lines that you just drew to run all over your paper. So be careful that you're not adding too much. I'm just making sure that the whole design is showing through pretty well. And then I'm going to lift carefully off my paper. I'm going to set this aside. Ooh, isn't that fun? So you'll see I lose a little bit of detail, but it's kind of interesting to see how those colors mix together and blur. If you add more water, you could create a lot more mixing on your paper as well. So Experiment. Show me what you come up with after your papers are dry. Be sure to leave them in a safe spot until they are dry or they could get ruined, okay? So I hope you have an awesome time creating these prints at home, and I'll see you soon.